social media is an advanced technology that allows for communications as well. It's another form of communications. It's an opportunity for people to have a voice, to share their insight, to put their knowledge out there, and to connect with people all over the world. Some of my closest friends that I have developed over the past couple of years, I've never met in person, but it feels like I've known them for years because we can continue to connect through virtual platforms. And I think that's such an incredible advancement of what technology has been able to give us over the years.
Hello, I'm John Brink and I'm podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And everybody knows where Canada is, and then where is Prince George? Well, everybody knows also where Vancouver is. In British Columbia, we are about 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our European friends, 800 kilometers. And that puts us in the center of British Columbia. Big province, east to west, north to south. An amazing province for all those people that think about going to Canada for a visit. Also include BC and in particular northern British Columbia. Lots of wildlife, lots of timber, lots of lakes all around us. Probably in 50 miles there are over 100 lakes. And on the way you will see all the wildlife that you can imagine. Black bears, grizzly bears, caribou, moose, deer, and you name it, we have it. So it's an amazing, amazing country. Today a very, very special guest. Her name is Danielle Kobo, and she is very, very special. Daniela has a Bachelor's of Communication with a minor in Psychology from the California State University of Fullerton. A certification includes leadership from the University of South Florida, Mona College, I believe, of business, and has a number of other credentials. Was quite involved in all levels of communications. She was a former Fortune 500 senior sales manager. And Daniela, you got an amazing bio. I can just go on and on and on. So, welcome to the show.
I am thrilled to be here, and thank you for having me on as a guest. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
So, communication is so critically important, and you have a story of that as well as I do. And I don't know if you noticed that already. I have a bit of an accent. I was born in Holland and left there when I was 23 to come to the land of my dreams, Canada. And so English is an acquired language for me. I grew up speaking Dutch. Actually, I grew up speaking dialect in Holland, the northeastern part of Holland. So when I grew up, I loved speaking dialect, so I had to learn to speak High Dutch, and I barely got that under control. And then I went across the world and had to learn to speak English. And when I came to Vancouver here in July of 1965, I didn't speak the language, I didn't know a soul, and I didn't have a job. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. But first about you, give us a bit of your amazing background, and then other things that I noticed in particular. You have twin boys.
I do, yes.
And and they are very, very active and at that active age. And so what are the names, Daniela?
Jameson and Maddox, and you said it spot on. They're very active. I often say that they have more energy than a squirrel on a triple espresso.
Sounds like I was. I'm just go, 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 go. Lots of activity. So tell us a little bit about your background as to where you grew up, and then obviously your schooling, and then especially communications has always been very, very important in your life and still is today, and appropriate so, because the world of communications is changing rapidly. You are, as I am, an in-demand keynote speaker, but then things are going beyond that, where I find a lot of times I go all over the place, do keynote presentations. It takes a lot of time, a lot of times, but very interesting, a lot of people to speak to. But then, obviously, about 2 years ago in particular, and already before that, I started to see that blogging was interesting to me, and then got involved with the local regional television station about communications that then evolved into doing COVID and to say, what do we do now? Because we couldn't go to the television station anymore. So I had an apartment here, downtown Prince George, and say, well, let's create a studio ourselves, which we did, and that's where I'm in today, and started then the form of podcasting again in the region, and then we did quite a few of those, and then there are a lot of interesting people here, but we were running out of people to podcast, and I thought maybe I have to set up, I had an apartment in Vancouver, maybe set up another studio there. But then the more we thought about it, and the more I watch television, and the more I see CNN, ABC, and all the other ones that we all watch, and then I see television, I see 1, 2, 3 different people all interacting from all around the world and saying, we have to go virtual. And so we started doing that, and likely now I would say at least 95% of all our podcasting is done virtual around the world. And you're an example of that, but especially for somebody that is so involved like I am and you are in communications, that extremely interesting, and it is just starting. It's just at the very beginning, in my view, and the platforms that are around it. And I know you have a podcast that is very popular, and it is the Unstoppable Global Podcast with Danielle Kobo, and it's probably on YouTube and all over the place, and again, very, very popular. So that then being said, it's still all evolving, isn't it? Communication is so critically important, even on local levels, personal levels, but also then in business and beyond, and then obviously broader than that. And I know you wrote a book as well, The Unstoppable Grid, I believe is the title. So you're also, I don't know if I mentioned it in the intro, but you're obviously an author as well. So am I. I've done about 5 books, and still working on another one. What is the topic, John, of the other one? It's about communications. And the last one that I did is interesting. This one is coming out, my last book is coming out actually next week. And this is the cover of it. And Living Young, Dying Old. It's a picture of me. I'm nearly 84. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America, and I'm very much into quality of life, and that's what the title is all about, Living Young, Dying Old. It's all about quality of life. It's not the number, but quality life in particular. And so the point that I'm making, and like to get feedback from you on it, is that the world of communications is changing rapidly. And so all the things that we already knew and know, and that leads me to, you're such an amazing individual, so I see this, and then what comes to mind, what you say, and I agree with you 100%, especially in this one, is don't just adopt it to change, own it. That's where we are today as it replies to communications.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, so
does it make
I
sense?
believe communications, I believe that communications is the lifeline to connectivity. And it's through communications that we get to interact with different people. We get to hear their story. We get to know them. And as we know, we all thrive when we're in community with people. That's how we were designed, was to be in community. And technology, in the way that is rapidly changed and advanced over the years, has given us the opportunity to communicate with people all over the world. as you've mentioned in podcasting, you're in Canada and I'm in Florida in the United States, and we're having a conversation that we may not have had years ago due to the technology of virtual conversations and
And you could,
podcasts.
and Daniela, you could be sitting here. That's how it feels. That's how close we are. And
Yes.
there you are on the other side of the United States.
There are many people, I would say too, social media is an advanced technology that allows for communications as well. It's another form of communications. It's an opportunity for people to have a voice, to share their insight, to put their knowledge out there, and to connect with people all over the world. Some of my closest friends that I have developed over the past couple of years, I've never met in person, but it feels like I've known them for years because we can continue to connect through virtual platforms. And I think that's such an incredible advancement of what technology has been able to give us over the years.
And it's still evolving, I believe, Daniela. Is the it is so amazing in terms of global. We have had people on from China, from South America, from Europe, and all over, and so have you, I'm sure. And and then the other part, from my personal perspective, and I believe you say the same. I'm a storyteller. That's who I am. That's when I write books. That's how I interact. That's how I communicate.
I believe that storytelling creates an emotional tie to somebody. You think about the friendships that you've developed over the years, and the people that you're often closer to are the people that you've shared your story with, you've been vulnerable with. And by opening yourself up to vulnerability, you're allowing somebody into your life and getting to know you. So I believe that there's so much power in storytelling. And when I am working with individuals that are, my background is in communications, specifically in marketing and advertising. And whether I'm helping somebody with job preparation and interview coaching, or whether I'm helping an entrepreneur and building their brand, it's all through storytelling. How could we take your message and what you've experienced, and how does that translate into the role that you're applying to? Or how does your story translate into how you can relate to your client and how your services can support them in achieving their goals?
Yeah, I agree 100%, and so much so that when I came to Canada, it was a dream that I always had. I was born in 1940, at the beginning in northeastern Holland, at the beginning of the Second World War. My mom and dad were married in 1938. They were in love and had dreams, had a house and a career, and the world was absolutely beautiful. Very quickly they had a boy and then a girl, and then I came along in the latter part of 1940, and then all of a sudden the world changed because the dictatorship Adolf Hitler and the German army invaded Holland, and the world in Holland would never be the same again for the next 5 years, and it was living under a dictatorship. And I still remember parts of it when I was 3.5, 4 years old, and that were bombers overhead of the Allied forces bombing the German infrastructure that was supporting the war. And in particular, if you kind of visualize, and I'm sure you can, northeastern Holland, province called Groningen, we were about 10 minutes from the border with Germany, and my dad was called into the Dutch army in April of 1940. And then the last time they heard from him, when he was caught in Rotterdam, when it was bombed and thousands of people died. And so for 5 years, they wouldn't know if he was dead or alive. And so my mom, with 2 kids and being pregnant with me, had to get through the war. And I still remember, as I said earlier, from the time that I was 3.5, 4 years old, bombers overhead, hundreds of bombers. And the sound of it, even now, I remember as a child, and then my mom would take us outside, especially in the evenings, on the flat deck behind our house, not to watch the planes, but she felt safer outside than inside. and in the distance we could see the red in the sky being red of the cities being bombed, like Bremen, Hamburg, Wilhelmshaven, and all the cities around the North Sea that touched on the North Sea. And the other part that I remember is that the Hunger Winter was the winter of 1944-45, and and it was the coldest winter on record, and lots of vulnerable people died, older ones and younger ones, because of the cold, and then no food. And I remember when I was nearly between 4 and 5 years old, of the winter of 1944-45, we would go, my brother, my sister, 1 year older, 2 year older than me, we would go every morning with gunny sacks. We would go into the railroad yards, pick up anything edible or burnable. And the reason that we did as kids, the Germans would kick us in the butt, but they wouldn't shoot us, and we'd be just back the following day. And then the other part that I remember is then being liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. And it made such an impression on me that from the time that I was 5, I always knew I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I was going to go when I was 17, and this is a bit of a connection because your husband was an airline pilot. I was then drafted into the Dutch Air Force. I wanted to be a pilot, but I didn't qualify, so I became special forces. But I'm a pilot now, but I always wanted to be a pilot, and from the time I was young. And so in any event, so I did that, and then I still had my dream of going to Canada. My dad did come back after the war, but things were never the same again. That's one of the things that I was going to mention, that a lot of people respectfully think that we have war and the war is over and everything goes back to normal. It simply doesn't. And it may take generations before things get back to a sense of normality. I know that from myself and my family. I still was affected by PTSD, being a child, and all those things. But going to Canada, and then, then I was not exactly a success story in academically. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? And my parents were beautiful people. And some people said, well, send him to the mentally challenged school, likely. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. So let's get him a job of some sort that he can build a career. And I liked lumber. And at 13, they sent me to a furniture factory. And then in the evenings, I would go to a college, and I became a furniture maker. And then I had the dream of going to Canada. And then finally, I worked already for some other companies in Holland in the lumber, and so my dream was to go to Canada, start with nothing, and then build my own lumber mill. And I still, a lot of people say to me even now, that did it trouble you that you failed grade 7 3 times, and the other thing that I should mention likely is that it took a long time for me it did trouble me for many years as to why I was different. And kids can be hard on each other, because all the kids that I would go to school with ended up in college and universities, and I became a laborer. I'm part of that today, but then I was kind of looked down on. But it took me a long time until I already was in Canada, came here in 1965, started with nothing from the ground up, had 1 suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and landed in Vancouver. Went to the immigration office. There was a German fella, and I could speak some German. Told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a lumber mill. He said, go to Prince George, it's a boom town. That's where the opportunities are. So I went to Prince George now 60 years ago, came off the bus here, the Greyhound bus. I can still see it here in the distance where the bus was. Came off the bus, 1 suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes. I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. But I had attitude. I'm always positive, no matter how tough things are, I always believe tomorrow will be better. I had passion. Whatever I do, I give it 150%. And work ethic, I work harder, even now at nearly 84. I work harder than anybody. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, must be military, and then I always think I'm late. And then since the time, I'm not here to say hurrah, hurrah, John. It's not about that. But I did build my mill and a number of other companies. But even then still, I still felt that looking at the past, why was I not able to do what the other kids did? And a lot of people already said to me, and I already was quite successful. I had a lumber mill, and everybody said, "Hey, John, you're so successful." I didn't feel that way, and till it took 32 years when I went into a bookstore in 1997, and I picked up a book, and I still don't know why. That the book's title was Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Halliwell. And as I opened the book, it was about ADHD. And I said, "Oh my God, that's me." And I wrote in the book in Dutch in 1997, January 1997. I wrote in the book, "Now I finally know who I am." And then it took me a while to understand what is, because there I'm building companies, and it was implied that there's mental issues or there's a distraction of some sort, and there's stigma attached. So there I'm building companies, and I go to the banks, and I'm trying to find lenders to give me millions of dollars for projects and I was very good at making presentations. But would I say, sorry, the other thing I forgot to mention, I have ADHD, and they would say, "Well, have a nice day." So, but obviously since the time, the more I found out about it, it took me even 5 years before I went to my own personal doctor that delivered our 2 daughters, and it was a friend, and I walked into his office, and, then I was already 62, and I walked into his office, and he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we checked on, "Yeah, I do." So the point is that since that time, a lot of things changed. I became an author. I've written 5 books. The first one was Against All Odds. I'm going to send these to you, and I'm going to sign them for you. And it's not about hurrah, hurrah, how successful John is. It's just the opposite. All the ups and downs. And then the second one that I wrote, that I thought was important, is that the more I found out about ADHD, the more I believed, and I still do today, it's a superpower. And as long as you understand it and what you can do with it, and I started including it in keynote presentations that I made, and then I wrote a book about it, ADHD Unlocked, and very popular actually, and I'm going to send you a copy of this one too. And then the other one that, then I did another one, and then the one that I'm working on now is about communications, and the other one is about living young, dying old. But the point that I wanted to make is this one, is that I did not know up to that point what it was, and then to understand it, then I felt I had an obligation, because I know there is so much, even today to a certain extent, lesser so than it was before, but still there was stigma attached, and incorrectly so. And so that I felt I had to write about it, and I speak about it frequently when it occurs. But the other part interesting about it, Danielle, is that Dr. Halliwell wrote 18 books, 5 on distraction, but he's also ADHD and he's dyslexic. But he is globally recognized as an expert in the area, in particular of ADHD. So you are podcast number 275. I had an opportunity to interview Dr. Halliwell on podcast 203, where we had interaction. Can you imagine? He wrote a book that changed my life in 1993. I bought it in 1997, and there I interviewed him so many years later, and I nearly wore out the book to understand it. So it was an amazing experience. But one of the things that we talked about is the frequency of occurrence. I thought then that it was initially around 8%. Then the more I got to find out about it, it's probably closer to 20. And I started talking to Dr. Halliwell about it and mentioned it to him. He's the expert, not me, saying that I thought it'd probably be closer to 20. He said, no, John, it's more like 25. And then the other part that we talked about, you may find interesting at least, is that I believe, because I've been so involved in organizations and companies and larger groups of individuals, that I believe that up to 50% of, and the operative is successful, entrepreneurs or CEOs are ADHD. He said, no, John, I believe more than 75%. And I agree with him. So, so that kind of gives you a bit of a background on my past. And that's why I so strongly believe in communication skills. And that's another one, and I don't want to take all the time here, but at one point in my life, and I believe it's correct for our conversation to share this with you, up to probably 1990, I was very successful in business, but I was not good in communicating. I didn't have the self-confidence. I was okay to interact with people inside and around me, maybe 3 at the time. And then my ex-sister-in-law actually dragged me to, she said, I want you to come with me to Toastmasters. And I said, what is it? And she said, well, that's where they develop communication skills. And I said, are they going to ask me any questions? She said, no, you just sit there and watch it. I said, okay, so I'll do that, reluctantly. So I sat down there, and then halfway through the meeting, somebody said, hey, John, tell us something about you. And I said, oh my God, I'll never go back here. But I did. I stayed for about 10 years. I became a distinguished Toastmaster, the highest level in Toastmasters. And not saying that other ones would not go to that level, but I was so committed to it that I stayed to the end. And probably around the world, as we speak, 450,000 people are involved in clubs around the world, mainly in North America. And probably 10 million people have benefited from it, and probably 1% or less than 1% go to the level of DTMs, but it changed my life. And it allowed me then to become, at the latter part of life, an author, an on-demand keynote speaker, and it allowed me to podcast as we do now, all because of those elements.
Toastmasters is very powerful. Another organization that I'm a big believer in is the National Speakers Association. I just graduated from the Speakers Academy and earned the Achievement Award in the Speakers Academy, and that really helped me develop and refine and hone in on my speaking skills as a keynote speaker. So it's another resource that's available for speakers out there.
And it becomes critical for success. And that's
Absolutely.
why, I'm writing my next book, and I've started it. It's coming out in August of 2025. I still haven't found a title for it, but for to become how important communication skills are, and then at the same time, amazement how it is lacking in our educational system, not being critical of them, and then having been involved in so many successful organizations, corporations, or associations, and finding the lack of the ability to interact and advance ideas and concepts and all the other things, simply because, in a lot of cases, and I say that respectfully, but of lacking communication skills.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Communication skills are essential, and when it comes to developing communication to communicate with people and success in general in all areas of life.
Yes. So, what would you say to, in particular, in the you took the communication skills from the university. I've forgotten which one it was, but initially,
Of
that's
Fullerton.
where,
Mhm.
yes, you found that to be the foundation, and then from there on in, you became very, very much in demand and worked with the Fortune 500 companies and as a sales manager of the organization. Well, that's very advanced and very recognizable of that's all about communications, isn't it?
Yeah, so I always knew that I wanted to get into medical sales. My mom was when I was 2.5 years old, my mom and dad got divorced,
Yeah.
and I saw my mom raised me as a single mom, was a cocktail server in the evening and going to school during the day to get her bachelor's degree. And I observed her grit and resilience and tenacity of going from nothing where we lived in a one-bedroom apartment to getting into medical sales, rising up the corporate ladder and becoming a regional sales manager for one of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies in the world, which as a female in the 1990s was not as common as it is
No,
today. So
exactly.
she really was a phenomenal role model for me, and I wanted to follow in those footsteps. So I knew I wanted to get in medical sales. And at first, I wanted to be first I wanted to be a journalist, then I wanted to be a psychologist, and then eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to follow my mom's footsteps, so I'm going to get into medical sales. And so I ended up graduating with a major in communications, specifically in marketing and advertising, with a minor in psychology. And I believe that those two complement each other very well when it comes to the education. And the
Agreed.
reason being is in sales, it's all about it's asking great questions, understanding the challenges and the pain points of the individual, and providing them with resources and solutions to help identify those challenges. And so being able to communicate effectively, being able to read body language, when have you said something that maybe have offended somebody, or maybe when they've piqued some interest and you want to lean in and do a little bit more depth on it. So I really believe what has set me up for success throughout my career is understanding the psychology on why people think the way that they think, how to communicate effectively to that individual. And then after I spent my 15 years in medical sales, I also got certified in DISC behavior model, which is being able to flex your communication style for individual personalities. And I believe that that was extremely beneficial because how I'm going to communicate to one person who leads with a little bit more of an analytical type mentality is going to be very different than somebody who's very direct, in the sense of somebody who has a dominant personality. I'm going to want to be concise and direct. Somebody that's an analytical personality, I'm going to go into much more in depth and being able to come prepared with the details of whatever they're going to be asking.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Now, the other part that I find, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, and I probably learned that at Toastmasters, and a lot of people ask me about Toastmasters, what is it all about? I say it's about communication skills. And they say, what is it all about, speaking then? I say, no. The first thing about Toastmasters is become a good listener. And then the second one is, how do you prepare to speak on stand up and impromptu responding to questions? And then the other one is to, how do you prepare a presentation? And I say in a simple form that I usually approach, I say, a presentation is basically you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then afterwards you tell them what you told them, and you fill it up in between. You know, so, something in those areas, but it's not quite as simple as that. But being a good listener is extremely important.
Yeah, we've all heard the phrase, you've got two ears and one mouth. And the biggest mistake that I see individuals in sales or business owners is they'll come in and they'll talk about the features and benefits of a particular product. Or as an entrepreneur, it's like, why do you need to work with me? And first, if you want to be effective in business, it's taking the time to ask thought provoking questions and to truly listen. And when I say listen, it's not only just with your ears, but following up with a question. So what I heard you say is XYZ. Is that
Right.
correct? To ensure that we are hearing clearly what that other person is communicating.
Yes. And that again is the skill set that you develop. I believe we don't do enough of that in our normal schooling system, and I'm not exactly sure. And then I'm kind of wondering, and it's interesting to get your opinion on this as we go forward. I say, how do we further develop that? Because of iPhones and other media that doesn't necessarily enhance it. And then the other part that becomes, to say the least interesting, a little bit scary, but the genie is out of the bottle, is artificial intelligence will change things again far beyond what we already have seen so far. It will become mega in terms of how it involves our lives in all different ways. And then I view it as a storyteller, communicator, as to how will that affect communications. I would like to think it will be beneficial to it, but other things that will be helpful to it in an amazing way, in my experience, is interactive on podcasting, for one, and which is still at the verge of emerging to substantial extent. So between AI, podcasting, and then social media, it changes the whole category of communications.
I believe you're right. When it comes to in our education system, there's so many skills that we're not developing to the level that we could be developing. I have 6-year-old twins, and since the age of 4 years old, just seeing every opportunity that they can communicate is a way of developing a skill set. So we go to a restaurant, and at 4 years old, they were ordering their own food. And it was scary to them, and I don't want to do it, or I'm shy. And I'm like, I'm right here with you. But if you want to eat tonight, then you get to order your food.
Yeah.
And they're joining, they're going to be joining the worship team at our church. And that's going to be them getting some skills of being on a stage. I talk openly about my fears sometimes, about the anxiousness I get before a speaking engagement, which is really funny that a lot of people, public speaking is one of the most feared actions that people do. However, what a lot of people don't realize is even the most seasoned, tenured professional speakers all get a little anxious before we go on stage. It's oftentimes because we want to do a really good job in ensuring that we're adding value to the audience.
It's critical that you do that, because if you don't, then I would say that worries me. But I do exactly what you do, is I do the presentation, I feel that sense of anxiety, and that allows me then to lift up higher within me and have that discussion with myself and all the other kind of things. But no matter how often I've done it, or I still have that feeling. And to a certain extent, the same with books. And then let me bring you back to the other one just for a second, because I touched on it, but I didn't finish it, if you don't mind. Is that a lot of people said to me in all the presentations that I do, and when I talk about it, I'm being very open about myself in terms of my background, and then a lot of males don't do that well. Having had counseling about the inner child, from the fear of losing that one parent during the Second World War, likely is that we had some challenges before we were married, we've been together now for over 40 years, but we sought some counseling for other issues, and so then the counselor said, I'd like to talk to John alone between us about the inner child. And I had no idea what it was. And we then together agreed that that was a good, very, very emotional. And it's that little boy that never got reconciled, right? So very important. And so that's where that came in. But the other part that I was going to mention is about grade 7. If I talk about, have you still, and I have had the question many times, that is it still bothering you that you only had grade 7? I usually say, yes, it does. It does still a lot of times, yeah. I should have left earlier. And so that usually gets a chuckle, is that saying that, somewhat tongue-in-cheek actually, but the point that I was trying and still am making is that we had not adapted is probably the right word, our schooling system to recognize that likely up to 30% of the population is ADHD in some form, or, and that's why I wrote the book on ADHD. It's written by somebody with ADHD. You can open it anywhere, go forward or backwards, it's all interesting. And you can start it anywhere you want to. It was important, but also it applies to slow learning or the ability to pay attention or drifting away, is that even people with trauma, are affected by similar things. And then the other part that I say, not only about my book, but about ADHD in a general sense, is that no matter where you are in your family and your friends and your workplace or in life in general, you will encounter people with ADHD, and they tend to be somewhat different and they approach things different, and to read about it makes it interesting to at least get the knowledge about who they are. But a lot of times, as we discussed with Dr. Halliwell, is that they become very, very successful. And the reason then, maybe to a certain extent, is why, I'd like you to comment on this, is that what I usually say is that, with all due respect to the people that have gone to universities and developed the skill sets of how do you go about managing or strategy and developing corporations and other things, how do you go about it, is that I've been quite successful in doing that. But usually when I'm involved in an organization where that particular topic comes up, being on the board of a number of other fairly major companies, then what I usually do, I go outside of the box and saying, why are we not doing this, that, or the other thing? And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but I'm simply challenging the status quo and saying, well, maybe we have to take a different approach. And that's probably one of the benefits that I feel for me, that I've always been, in spite of it all, a very good writer. I was very good with numbers, but in business, I believe I'm a very good strategic thinker of looking forward. And then the other part that you can relate to, I believe I'm a good communicator. And the combination of all the above has made me likely successful.
I believe that those characteristics lead to a lot of success. Being able to think outside the box, being able to challenge the status quo, being able to be innovative, not stuck in our ways, and to communicate are all essential characteristics that can lead to success. We've heard the phrase, that's not the way we've always done it. And I think that those are detrimental to business. There's been so many times where, as I've worked for organizations and I've heard people on my team say, well, that's not the way we've always done that, or we've tried that before. And you're met with resistance. And if the world is always going to be evolving and changing, technology is changing at such a rapid pace. generations are approaching and responding differently in the workplace and in business. And if we are not evolving with it or with them or the way that the direction of where the future is going, then those businesses are going to fail.
And globally, Danielle, that we are very fortunate to be in North America. And I fly around a lot commercially. I'm also a pilot, but I wanted to be a jet pilot like your husband, but that didn't happen.
My husband's a Black Hawk pilot. He's for Black Hawk pilot for the Army.
Yeah,
So he flies helicopters. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, but that would have been okay with me too. But so I'm a private pilot now and commercial license. But I don't do much flying directly. But I do a lot of commercial flying, and we do a lot of business in the United States. So, and every time I fly commercially, I always sit by the window. If I fly in Canada or the United States, and I look out of the window, I say, "It's paradise. It is paradise." And if I look around the world and then see, I grew up in dictatorship, really, the first 5 years, and it affected the rest of our lives and the family. My dad was never the same again. Our family was never the same again because of it, and I still am affected by it today, now 80 years later. But then how lucky we are, so this beautiful land, and then looking around the world, the Ukraine and the Middle East, and then from there and then you can go on and on to Russia, to China, to Venezuela, to Cuba, and on, South America in particular, and saying how lucky we are in North America and have all this, what we have all around us. We are very, very fortunate. And then, as I said during the intro, is that I'm lucky to the land of my dreams was Canada. It's such a big, huge company. And one of the questions you maybe have in your mind is saying, "Hey, John, just out of curiosity, if you took 3 books, what did you take with you?" And so, and the one book that I took with me is Management by Drucker, and the other one was Logical Thinking, all in Dutch. And then the other one was about Canada. And the other part that I did, even as a young man then, and even when I was still, after I came out of school and I was already a laborer, I would go far and wide and listen to people that were entrepreneurial and had been successful, and listen to their story as to what made them click. Why were they successful and what made it happen to them? I wanted to understand that, and so I still do that today. Actually, if I see a good speaker or a good presenter, and I'm one of them now, but I always like to listen to them, and it was amazing in terms of the consistency of the patterns between successful people. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. Patterns, yeah.
And so the other part that came to mind is that I'm going to show you the bound book that I did, and I want to share with you, is that I heard on the US, one of the US channels, we watch a lot of the US, and I forget now which one it was, but they said that 75% of the people that work in the United States, and I believe Canada is the same, no question about that, don't like their jobs. And 70% of the 75% are looking for another job. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing somewhat troubling to me is that I do a lot of presenting to younger people, either at high schools, colleges, universities, all over the place. And what I usually do is say to them during my presentations is that, what are you going to do as a career? Have you ever, respectfully, have you thought about it? And a lot of them said, no. I said, well, I believe it's important, that what I would do, again, respectfully, is that if you think about hypothetically speaking, you want to be a truck driver, talk to a truck driver, see what they do, how that works, blah, blah, blah. Or you want to be a builder or a contractor, talk to somebody who builds houses or whatever. They would love to talk to people that say, I'm interested in seeking a career or opportunities. Or you want to be a medical doctor, or you want to be a lawyer, or you want to be an entrepreneur or a CEO. Talk to them and find out what they do. And so I believe that is so important. So then, but I thought I should write a book about that. And so the book is Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And I'm going to send a copy of that to you too.
Oh, that'd be great.
Is that, so basically the fair question would be then, hey John, since you have been working now for, you're nearly 84, so you've been working for 71 years. So are you living the dream? I am. Still now, every day, I'm living the dream. That's why I get up at 5:30 in the morning. That's why I make my bed, and that's why I'm in a hurry to get to work, because that I have that, and that is another part that falls into the category of living young, dying old, because I keep mentally active, very active. And a lot of people say to me, how do you do all this stuff? There you have 10 companies, you're writing books, you're podcasting, how do you do it? I say ADHD, that's how I do it. So, but the key is to stay mentally, physically, and in fit and healthy. And I go to, obviously, I'm not suggesting that everybody should be a bodybuilder. There has to be, like, I'm just like everybody else. At the end of the year, we all say, okay, next year I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. And one of them includes buying a membership to the gym. And then 2 weeks later, you find 100 reasons as to why you're too busy to go to the gym. So I got a shock in life where I nearly died, and so that kind of changed me, and and so I was already then nearly 60 years old, and I knew my wife is vegetarian, and so I didn't listen as well as I should, but I was okay, but not quite as good as I could be. I'm now vegan, so at least 90% or 80. Well. Yeah, so anyway, so what I did is I knew I had to do something about my body and change things. So I got a trainer, and then I live by appointments. And so once I have a trainer and I make a commitment, I have to be there. So that's what I did. And then when I started training for about 6 years, somebody came up to me and said, have you ever thought about competing? I said, me? Yeah. And I said, well, why not? So that's what I did. And the following year, I started competing. Bodybuilding and physique, and came second bodybuilding in Northern BC, third in physique. That qualified me for the provincials, came in third, and bodybuilding second in physique, and that qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. And so then COVID came. Now I'm training again, as you can see. That's how I look today. Is I want to go to the Arnolds in 25, and then I'm 85. And I've already sent several messages to Arnold. I wanted to have him on my podcast, but he hasn't responded yet. If you know him, tell him I'll be back. The point is staying physically active, mentally active, and diet is very important to me, and I speak about that a lot, and I have a lot of people on my podcast that are equally proactive on it as I am, and I believe that is very important.
Yes, it is. It's very important. It's important to take care of your mental, physical, and emotional well-being so that you can show up as the best version of yourself.
We're approaching the hour. Any comments, Danielle, so far on our conversation?
I mean, it sounds like you've had a very interesting life, and there's so much value that you've been able to take away from your experiences and how they've shaped you into who you are today, and sharing that knowledge with your listeners. I think it's incredible that you're able to as you mentioned, there's not a lot of men that are able to be vulnerable, especially coming from a military background. So to hear another man talk about some of their challenges, I believe will inspire other people to do the same.
Yeah. And I appreciate it, and I believe that is very important. And then for all the people that are watching us from around the world, Danielle has a podcast, the Unstoppable Global Podcast, that is on all major media. She is an author. Her book is, maybe mentioned, is Grit, Unstoppable Grit. Is that available on
Amazon? So yeah, my book, Unstoppable Grit, Break Through the 7 Roadblocks Standing Between You and Achieving Your Goals, is available on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and audio.
Okay. And have you got a website that you can share with us?
Yes, DanielleKobo.com, and I'm on LinkedIn as well, Danielle Kobo.
Okay. And then we have the same, the johnabrink.com, and we on all major media. So I urge the people that like our podcast and Danielle's and mine as well, podcasting around the world. If you like what we are doing, and it is helpful to us, to subscribe, share it with others, and make comments. And we enjoy podcasting. Obviously, Danielle does, and I do. And communication is so critically important. And Danielle, it was a pleasure and a privilege to have you on my podcast.
Thank you. It was an honor to be on the podcast.
Let's make sure we stay in touch. And I'm going to make sure I send you all those books that I have, and I'll sign them all for you as well.
Oh, thank you.